In Stan America, losing its most loyal visitors, and it's already costing towns millions in less than a year. Over 5 million Canadians have simply stopped visiting the U.S., leaving a trail of empty hotels, shuttered diners, and ghost town resorts. From Vermont to Florida, Canadian tourists once made up half the revenue in some states. Local economies are crumbling, and few people are paying attention.
50% of the tours that my company gives are for Canadian high school group.
We're going to feel it, a big impact in our pocket end of the season if they don't show up.
In this video, we're revealing the top 10 U.S. states most at risk from Canada SIP's quiet boycott. Some of them might surprise you. Stick around. This is a story the news isn't set to telling, but local businesses are living every day. New York. When you hear New York, your mind probably jumps straight to Manhattan. The flashing lights, the non-stop energy, the noise that never really quiets down. But if you head north, past the skyline, past the traffic, you'll find another side of New York. One that used to depend on every car that crossed the border from Ontario. Those cars just aren't showing up anymore. Back in 2024, Canadian visitors made up the biggest share of international tourists to New York, especially in upstate areas. From Niagara Falls and Lake George to the sleepy towns tucked along the lakes, these communities thrived on that cross-border bond. But now, in just 1 year, Canadian tourist revenue has dropped by 30 to 50% in some places. The inn that was once booked solid all spring is now wide open. Lakeside restaurants are closing early, even on weekends. The duty-free shop feels abandoned. At the Buffalo and Alexandria Bay border crossings, the long lines of cars are gone. The parking lots are empty, except for the birds picking through the gravel. For years, New York was the perfect weekend trip for Canadians. It was close, it felt familiar, and it didn't break the bank. But now, prices are climbing. The border feels less friendly, and that sense of being welcome, it's starting to disappear. More and more, Canadians are choosing to stay home or find somewhere else to go. And it's not the city that's taking the hit. It's the small towns, the suburbs, the quiet corners of the state that depended on that weekend traffic.
In a hotel under 700, and that was doing it too.
For people in upstate New York, the cars from Quebec and Ottawa weren't just bringing tourists. They brought life. They were part of what made summer feel like summer.
If you think about the United States, first thing which comes to your mind is New York City.
New York City is still buzzing. The lights are still on. The crowds are still coming. But outside the city, where border towns are growing quiet and businesses are hanging on by a thread, it's a different story. One we don't talk about enough. A state can't thrive on one city alone, and no community can keep its heart beating if the people who once loved it stop showing up. New York needs to do more than boost its tourism ads. It needs to rebuild trust, to listen, to care about the voices coming from the edges. Because if we lose the people who once saw us as neighbors, as friends, then maybe the New York dream is no longer a living thing. Maybe it becomes just another faded postcard left forgotten in a drawer. Washington, it used to be simple. Just a short drive south from Vancouver and you'd be in Seattle, grabbing coffee on the waterfront, hitting the outlet stores, maybe catching a Mariners game if the timing was right. But now, that easy border crossing feels like a wall. The border didn't grow any taller, but the distance sure feels longer. Washington used to be the #1 spot for Canadians heading into the U.S. by car, especially from British Columbia. In 2024, more than 3 million Canadians made that trip. They rolled through checkpoints like Peace Arch, Sumas, and Blaine, coming to shop, to camp, to fill up their tanks, or just to breathe in a different kind of weekend. But by 2025, something changed. The once busy mall in Bellingham now echoes with silence. Gas stations near the border, once crowded with Canadian plates, are wide open. The Tulalip outlet had to cut a third of its seasonal staff and farmers markets in the little towns along the highway are tossing out produce that no one showed up to buy. Washington was never just another U.S. state for Vancouver residents. It was the backyard, the weekend playground, the place you crossed into for cheap gas, good deals, and a change of pace. But now, what they're seeing is something else entirely. The exchange rate makes a tank of gas in the U.S. feel 25 to 30% more expensive. Border policies that were supposed to relax after COVID are still acting like we're in a lockdown. And the welcome just doesn't feel warm anymore. Washington has always been a bridge, not just in location, but in spirit, a connection. A shared space between two countries that once felt like close friends. But when that bridge cracks, it's not Seattle that takes the hit. It steps the small towns at the edge of the map where every car with a BC plate was once a lifeline. And the truth is, Washington doesn't need a flashy tourism campaign to fix this. Sometimes all you have to do is speak from the heart. Say what really matters. We miss you. That's how you start rebuilding. That's how the baker turns on the oven again. How the gas station lights come back on. How the barista stops checking the clock between customers, not because of the money, but because hope came back with them. Because if Washington forgets show to be a good neighbor, if the welcome fades, and the kindness gets lost somewhere between the border booths, then what will we have left? Pine trees, empty highways, and memories of a time when the road between us felt a lot shorter, California. Most people think California is too big to fail, too glamorous, too iconic. How could a place with endless sunshine and the Hollywood sign ever run into trouble? But here sits something not many are talking about. One of California's most loyal and highest spending groups of tourists, Canadians, has quietly disappeared. And with them, something else left too. The buzz, the laughter, the little moments that made these cities feel alive. At one point, close to 1 million Canadians came to California every year. From Vancouver, Toronto, even the French-speaking corners of Quebec. They came for the sun, the wine, the movies, and that feeling of stepping into a dream. But by 2025, that dream feels a little emptier. Hotels in San Francisco and San Diego are now seeing bookings drop by 20 to 30%. Hollywood tour buses are cutting their routes. And the souvenir shop on Venice Beach, it closes earlier now. There is just not enough foot traffic to keep the doors open till dark. And no, it is not just about high flight prices or California's rising cost of living. The issue runs deeper than that. Canadians are starting to feel like they are not wanted, whether it is the ripple effects of immigration policy changes, lingering trade tensions, or just a shift in the cultural vibe. Something feels off. And for many, it is not worth the trouble anymore. The weaker Canadian dollar is not helping either. It is hard to argue with that. Her shop used to be the kind of place people stumbled into and then returned to every time they were in town. It was part of someone's vacation tradition. Now, ? It is mostly locals walking by, and even that is thinning out. She is thinking of closing her doors for good. California still shines on the surface. The beaches are still golden, the wine still flows in Napa, and the palm trees still lean in the breeze. But if no one is here to take it in, if the people who once called it their second home stop coming, then what does all that beauty mean? Because here is the thing, California has never just been about money. It has always been about magic. The kind that happens when someone from another part of the world feels like they belong here, even if just for a few days. If California wants to keep that magic alive, it may be time to stop looking only at numbers. Maybe it is time to send a message to the people who used to fill these streets with stories and smiles. We remember you, we still want you here. Because without them, even the dreamiest state in America can start to feel a little more distant, a little less alive. And the truth is, California needs those warm winter visits just as much as Canadians once needed their California escape. Texas. If you still think Texas only runs on oil, cattle, and barbecue, well, you are only seeing half the picture. The truth is, there has been a quiet but steady stream of visitors from the north that helped keep Texas humming. Tourists who came not for the spotlight, but for the soul, the warm weather, the freedom of the open road, the promise of something different. In 2024 alone, more than 1 million Canadians made their way down here. And not just to the big names like Houston, Austin, or Dallas, but to the small towns, the RV parks, the family-run restaurants tucked between stretches of open highway. But fast forward to 2025, and the story has changed. The RV parks are mostly empty. Restaurants in San Antonio are closing earlier than they used to. Rental car lots are full of vehicles no one is picking up. Gas stations are too quiet, and the hotels that once scrambled to hire seasonal help, they have stopped calling people in. It is not just about money, it is about presence, the warmth of familiar strangers returning year after year. So what happened? Some point to the economy, inflation, uncertainty. Others say it is something deeper, something harder to name. Texas, for all its pride and strength, has started to feel a little unfamiliar to some international visitors, especially Canadians who used to drive or fly in with ease. Some say it is the political climate, a feeling that certain values are shifting in a direction they do not fully recognize or feel comfortable with anymore. And that's Sebas the part that hits the hardest, not the lost bookings or the slower weekends, but the feeling that a relationship once rooted in warmth and welcome has quietly drifted. For Texans who have made their lives around hospitality, that change is personal. This is a man who remembers names, who took pictures with his passengers before they flew home, who could count on those trips like clockwork. Now, he is counting missed opportunities instead. Texas has always been more than just a place. It has been a feeling, a state of mind, a symbol of openness, boldness, and wide skies with room for everyone. But even symbols can fade if they forget who helped paint the picture in the first place. If the places that were once full of snowbirds and road trippers continue to sit quiet, if drivers and servers and tour guides have no one left to welcome, then what are we really left with? It is not enough to say, come back in a glossy ad. Texas needs to say it with heart. To open the door again with the same spirit that made people fall in love with it to begin with. We still value you just like before. That sentence alone could rebuild the bridge. Because without those familiar faces, without the stories shared over brisket and campfires, Texas might still have the sunshine, but it is going to feel a whole lot colder. Michigan, for years. Canadians treated Michigan like a neighbor's porch. You dropped by, had lunch, grabbed a few things, and still made it home before dinner. The drive from Ontario into Michigan felt easy, familiar. You crossed the Ambassador Bridge, hit the mall, maybe caught a Tigers game or sat by the lake with a coffee. Simple, satisfying. But not this year. In 2025, that ease has vanished. And so have millions of Canadian visitors. And that quiet disappearance, it is starting to echo through Michigan's SEP's border towns. In 2024, Canadians were everywhere, shopping in Detroit, vacationing on Mackinac Island, fishing up in Traverse City, stopping by Port Huron or Sault Ste. Marie just to fill up the tank and grab dinner. They were part of the rhythm. Now the rhythm is broken. Ferries that once carried laughter and luggage now run nearly empty. Some cutting trips entirely just to stay afloat. Motels along the highways are seeing 20 to 30% revenue drops. Duty-free shops are dim by dusk. And restaurants that used to welcome a wave of weekend guests are down to a trickle. For some towns, the situation is so tight they are scaling back staff, closing early, and even considering canceling festivals that were once built around those Canadian visitors. It is not just economics, it is identity. The connection between Ontario and Michigan used to be steady, strong, like the surface of the lake that joins them. But lately, that connection feels thinner. Not gone, but distant. Why? A few reasons. The exchange rate is biting again, turning a simple day trip into a pricey affair. Customs and border rules have tightened too. What used to be a quick hop now feels like a full-blown ordeal. And slowly the casual trips stopped happening. The relationships started to fade. But here's the thing. This does not have to be permanent. Michigan has a chance to bring that connection back. Not just by crunching numbers or launching ads, but by remembering what made this bond special in the first place. Small things. A warm welcome at the gas station. Clearer border processes that respect both security and ease. And maybe just saying the words out loud, "We miss having you here," because when towns lose their regulars, they lose more than income. They lose stories. They lose familiar faces that made the place feel alive. And if the bridges are still standing, but people no longer want to cross them, then maybe the issue is not the structure itself. Maybe it's that the spark that once made both sides lean in has started to dim. It is time to relight it. Michigan is still here, waiting. But this time, I might need to take the first step. Arizona. In Arizona. People like to joke that winter is just a word in a calendar, but this year something feels different. The air is still warm, the sky is still clear, but the feeling, the energy is not the same. Because the people who used to make Arizona glow every winter are slowly disappearing. For years, this place was a sun-drenched haven for tens of thousands of Canadians, retirees especially. They came for the warmth, the space, the quiet golf mornings, and the hum of friendly towns like Yuma, Mesa, and Tucson. They bought homes. They parked RVs. They became part of the rhythm. Now in 2025, that rhythm is off. RV parks, that once filled up a year in advance, are sitting mostly empty. The Canadian RV community, once a reliable engine of local life, is seeing its highest vacancy rates in over 10 years. Golf courses are down by as much as 40% in daily play. And the local grocery store? They have stopped stocking the little comforts Canadians used to love, tea brands, familiar cookies. No one is reaching for them anymore. It is not that Canadians have stopped loving Arizona. It is that Arizona is no longer feeling like it loves them back. There is post-pandemic fatigue, sure. But there is something deeper happening, something harder to shake. The heavy politicization of health, the loud debates about freedom, the growing tension around immigration and inclusion, it all adds up. And for older Canadian travelers who once saw Arizona as a place to breathe and rest, the vibe is changing. Add to that the rising cost of travel health insurance and a weak Canadian dollar, and suddenly those warm winters feel more like a splurge than a ritual. And Arizonans are feeling it too. Arizona still has the sun. But sunshine alone does not fill a cafe. It does not bring laughter to golf courses or keep border towns alive. What once felt like a tight-knit seasonal community now feels like a rerun of something great, still beautiful but empty, like a favorite movie with no one left to watch it. And when the people who returned every year suddenly stop coming back, it is not just about lost revenue. It is a sign of something more, a fracture in the connection, a silence in the places that used to hum with northern voices. Arizona needs to remember, warmth is not just temperature, it is how you treat people. It is how you greet them, how you make them feel when they arrive. Because keeping the door open with a smile may be the only way to make sure the soul of this place, the one built by community, by return visits, by people who felt at home here, does not quietly slip away. This is not just tourism, this is something personal. And if Arizona wants to bring those winters back to life, it might need to start with 3 simple words. You're still welcome. Nevada, Las Vegas never sleeps. But when the Canadian tourists stopped coming, Suddenly the city started losing sleep too, worrying about revenue, jobs, and a kind of uncertainty it had never faced before. Back in 2024, over 1.7 million Canadians made their way to Nevada. Most headed straight for Las Vegas, the Strip, the casinos, Reno, and resorts. They were not just tourists. They were familiar faces. Faces known by hotel front desks, regulars who stayed for weeks, spent freely, and came back year after year. But by 2025, everything changed. Hotels along the Strip dropped from filling 90% of their rooms during peak season to just 50%. Flights from Canada were slashed or outright canceled. Restaurants, casinos, and convention centers started seeing red in their books. Weekday specials popped up everywhere, desperate attempts to fill empty seats and rooms. So what happened to a state once topping the charts for tourists? If you know Canadians, you know they didn't just come for the neon lights. They saw Vegas as their second playground. But lately, that feeling has shifted. They no longer see Las Vegas as a place that matches their values, their culture, or even their sense of safety. Throw in rising airfare, soaring meal prices, and a growing sense of disrespect in how policies have been handled, and suddenly they sit choosing Europe, Mexico, or simply staying home. And the people who keep the city alive, the drivers, the casino staff, the tour guides, they're feeling the impact first. They are the backbone of this industry, and when the steady stream of Canadian visitors dries up, it shakes their world. Nevada used to be a place where people forgot about time, but now time is sending a very clear message. Nobody is invincible. A city built on tourism cannot thrive if it loses the visitors who made it their tradition, even if those visits only lasted a few weeks a year. Las Vegas can keep shining its lights, but it can't compete on lights alone. What truly matters now is sincerity, safety, and respect. It's time for Las Vegas and all of Nevada to wake up and realize rebuilding trust with the people who once loved you is not just a strategy. It is a matter of survival, because when the lights stay on but no one stops to admire them anymore, that is the real problem. Maine is more than just a coastal state. It's a place that thrives on those summer visits from people who think of it as a second home. And when a town depends on those familiar faces coming back year after year, and suddenly they don't, it's not just about the money. It's about losing a piece of its soul. In the 2025 tourist season, campsites sat empty during the peak months, something that hadn't happened in 2 decades. Cruise tours in Main Bay struggled to get enough passengers to even set sail. Seafood shops, ice cream stands, and cozy coastal inns had to close their doors early. Many tourist spots stopped hiring seasonal workers because there was simply no demand. The Canadians weren't coming like they used to. Maine doesn't boast flashy casinos or giant amusement parks. What it offers is something different, a quiet, rustic escape, a chance to breathe, to be close to nature. And Canadians treasured that more than anyone. But by 2025, the border was still tangled in restrictions. Travel costs shot through the roof. And after all the political upheaval, many started wondering if they'd still be welcomed with open arms. So they stayed home or picked somewhere else to spend their summers. Maine might not need to shout about its beauty because everyone already knows it's breathtaking. But here's what needs to be said again and again. Canadians used to feel welcomed here. That feeling is what kept them coming back year after year. A sincere invitation, a heartfelt, "We miss you," might be just what it takes to bring those lighthouses back to life, shining out into the world instead of into an empty sea. Because if the tourists stop coming, then Maine's beauty, no matter how peaceful, is just the sound of waves quietly lapping in solitude. South Carolina, especially Myrtle Beach, used to be like a second home for hundreds of thousands of Canadians every year. Not just tourists passing through, but snowbirds, retirees who settled in for the winter sun. But come 2025, everything shifted. Cancellation rates shot up by 40% during the winter months. the very heart of their season. Resorts and vacation apartments sat empty for longer than ever. Some even slashed prices so much they were offering the first month free, just to fill the space. Seaside restaurants that once buzzed with lively crowds now barely run at half capacity. Staff hours got cut, and places closed earlier than anyone could remember. Golf courses that used to be packed from dawn to dusk now find themselves keeping the lights on and the doors open, waiting for players who don't show up. South Carolina used to be the poster child for Southern hospitality. The warm weather, the affordable living, the easygoing culture, these were the reasons Canadians flocked here. But lately, with policies tightening around personal freedoms and immigration, some of that warmth feels like it's slipping away. It's like the communities that once welcomed Canadians with open arms are starting to feel distant. And then there sits the rising cost of travel, car rentals, airfare, health insurance. They've all climbed so much that what used to be a simple winter getaway is now a real financial puzzle. If South Carolina wants those glorious winters back, it might not need a flashy campaign or a big makeover. Maybe all it needs is to step out of its own shadow, open the door wider and say, "We miss you. You're still welcome here." Because when the most beautiful beaches in America are quiet and empty, maybe it's not just the tourists who've changed. Maybe we have too. Florida, did you know Florida used to welcome over 3.5 million Canadian visitors every year? That sips a number so big. In some neighborhoods you'd hear more French and English than American. But now, even the busiest streets are starting to fall silent. Between the winter of 2024 and 2025, Canadian visitors dropped by more than 40%. Vacation apartments that used to fill up months in advance now sit empty for weeks on end. Resorts started offering extra months just to keep a handful of guests. And the Canada-friendly restaurants in Fort Myers? They shut their doors completely. Even the coastal mobile home communities, once buzzing with Canadian retirees and snowbirds, have turned quiet, wild grass growing, where cars used to park. Florida used to be a place where Canadians came for freedom, safety, and comfort. A place that felt second home. But everything is shifting. Rising costs of healthcare, insurance, housing, and everyday services have made Florida less of a haven and more of a worry. Add to that, growing concerns about security and safety. And then there sits the climate, the storms, the heat, the extreme weather events. It sits pushed many Canadians to look elsewhere. Mexico, Portugal, or even just staying put at home. Florida once didn't need to advertise itself. People just came back year after year, like clockwork. It was part of life. Now, Florida faces a risk much bigger than empty hotels or quiet beaches. It's at risk of losing what made it special, its connections to the people who made it home for half the year. Florida doesn't lack sunshine or blue seas. But it's missing something much harder to replace: the warmth that comes from real relationships. What Florida needs now is more than just good weather. It needs kindness. It needs a genuine "we remember you" sent out to the Canadian community. It needs policies that ease tensions and open doors instead of closing them. Because when a place once called paradise no longer has room for those who once loved it, maybe that paradise is slipping away, one quiet winter at a time. So, what does the future hold for these states? Will they find a way to bounce back? Or are we witnessing the slow unraveling of communities once fueled by friendship and shared borders? The quiet boycott from Canada is more than just a travel trend. It sits a wake-up call. For businesses, for leaders, and for all of us who care about these places, the time to act is now. If this story surprised you, or if you know someone who lives in one of these states, share this video, because awareness is the first step toward change. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on stories that matter.